This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Jerz, also known on Twitter as the Way of Jerz. Jerz left the U.S. more than 15 years ago. He's a dual U.S.-Austrian citizen and holds residence cards in Panama, Colombia, Brazil, Spain, Paraguay, Mexico. He set up businesses on 3 continents, and he's, you could probably say, an expert on sovereignty and internationalization. So this will be an exciting one for the Twitter fans, for our followers on Twitter. I'm sure they've been looking forward to this for a while. Jerz, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling in from today?
Today I am in Medellin, Colombia, one of my favorite spots.
One of your favorite spots. With all these residence cards under your belt, Medellin is
Yes.
still the spot.
It's probably the first place I spent multiple years living in. And well, I'll go back a little bit and give you my background. I left the United States in about 2008. And the idea at the time, I was just going to take 6 months, a year, and travel around. I didn't really intend to stay. And now, 15, 16 years later, I'm still here. Um, I've lived in Panama. That was the place where I started. Went to Argentina, stayed there for a couple of years, Costa Rica. And then I sort of found myself in Colombia by chance. And my original thought was I was going to spend a couple months max in Colombia. Originally, I was actually going to go to Cartagena because back then Colombia really didn't have any foreigners outside of Cartagena. So that's where you went. That was what was considered safe. And I was coming out of Costa Rica and I had spent a lot of time in Manuel Antonio. And I just needed to go somewhere that wasn't so hot. So I turned to Google and Medellin came up and I ended up coming here and actually ended up staying for years. Um, just really fell in love with the place. As I said at the time, there really weren't a lot of foreigners. So it was very, very different than it is now. Um, but yeah, I just, especially back then, it just had a really good combination of elements that really spoke to me. I liked the climate, I liked the people. When I started out, I was living in Poblado, so I felt it was walkable enough for me. Um, Ended up starting some businesses, and then it just seemed that I always ended up either having a girlfriend who was Paisa or a business or some reason that kept me here. And so I spent a number of years mostly staying in Colombia. And now I spend less time in Colombia, but yeah, still definitely holds a special place in my heart. Um, I've actually become more recently, I think I've become very fond of Bogota. I've written about that a lot on Twitter. Um, just currently where I'm at, I think I prefer Bogota to Medellin at this point, just because of the walkability. Um, and I really enjoy staying in that area, sort of between Chapinero and Parque 93. And I just find that area has everything I could possibly want or need. So other than the trip to the airport, I go there, I plant myself there for a few weeks, few months, and I just never leave. I don't have to get in another Uber. And the only drag's the weather, of course, but other than that, I just find myself really enjoying Bogota.
Good. That's a good perspective on the Bogota versus Medellin debate.
It really depends. People ask me that question a lot. It really depends what you're looking for. Medellin, I think, is a little bit less expensive. Um, it's probably a little bit easier and friendlier to the digital nomad now because there are just so many digital nomads here. Bogota, it's easier to blend in. Even staying in that central area, you can go days or even weeks where you really, unless you look for it, you don't encounter other foreigners. And that can be nice depending, again, what you're looking for.
Hmm. So are you still living the sort of trifecta lifestyle? You're kind of one of the biggest proponents of some variation of the trifecta other than the nomad capitalist himself, where you enjoy spending, kind of 4 months a year, give or take, in a couple different locations. Would that be somewhat accurate?
I would say so. I think in the next few years, I'm probably going to settle down somewhat and not move around quite as much. Um, just getting a little bit tired of the travel and the airplanes. But I've really enjoyed that lifestyle for the last half dozen years or so. Yeah, I've really gone back and forth. Colombia, Brazil, Spain. Those were the three big ones. Mix in a few weeks in the U.S. to go visit my parents. And yeah, it's just a perfect combination. I really I think I wrote about that yesterday or today. I really like the combination of Europe and Latin America because I think the Southern Europe, the Spain, the Portugal, um, it's a really good contrast. To me, you come to Latin America, it has the chaos, it has the excitement, and then you go to Europe and there's more order to it, it's cleaner, and it's just a really nice balance for me.
And you recently went back to the USA and had some good observations as someone kind of visiting your former homeland.
I do. Every time I go back, it just keeps amazing me how much it changes and how rapidly it's been changing. Um, I go back to the San Francisco Bay Area, which, of course, unfortunately, is an area that at this point has more problems than almost anywhere else in the United States. Um, just the crime, the prices, the cost. I think not living there, going back I probably go back every 4 months or so. I think you really see the difference in prices to an extent you otherwise would not. So every time I go back, I feel like prices have gone up 20, 30, in some cases
Hmm.
50%. And the difference is just astounding. I comment a lot on that. I don't know how a regular person with a regular 9 to 5 job can make it there anymore. It's gotten absolutely crazy. And then when you add in the crime and just the grit, the homeless people on the street. It really has become an unpleasant place to even visit, but certainly to live.
And some people might argue, oh, the crime's bad in Latin America, and who cares about money? So you have some good arguments in response to that.
I mean, Latin America, look, anywhere in the world you go has its danger. I'm not going to say that danger doesn't exist in Latin America, but if you come and you use common sense, you don't do things that you shouldn't be doing. Most of the stories I hear, most of the people I know where really bad things have happened in Latin America, it's because they were doing something or in a place that they really shouldn't have been in, or involved with people, or something that got them in trouble. For the regular person, you come down here, you stay relatively clean. Um, Probably nothing's going to happen. Yes, people do get robbed down here, but I've been robbed a couple of times. But in every case, it was simply somebody stealing a cell phone. Not the most pleasant experience, but I have a lot of friends who've been robbed in the U.S. now. So, as I said, it's something that more and more is happening everywhere in the world.
And beyond just the safety thing, maybe we could speak to a few more of the other differences of the US versus Latin America in terms of what else? I mean, walkability, obviously, the food. What are some of the big differences that impact your life and lifestyle?
The walkability for me is huge. Just having to go back to rent a car to deal with that, to drive everywhere. The lifestyle where everything you want to do, you want to go to the grocery store, you've got to get in the car. Um, it, it's something I never liked. And now that I haven't done it for so many years, I like it a lot less. It's just so much nicer in Latin America. Most places, especially if you're living in a city, um, you're able to just go outside your house, go outside your apartment, go walk to a supermarket. Everything you need and want for the most part is within walking distance. I don't even use Uber that much where I set myself up in these places, because I always make a point of renting something in a very central area that allows me access to the things I want. And I always
Mhm.
recommend that to people, whether if you're a big restaurant person, surround yourself by restaurants, coffee shops, gyms, whatever it is, medical. If you come and you have a lot of medical stuff, make sure you stay in an area where you have good access to the doctors. And that's just so easy to do in most of these cities in Latin America. Um, as far as like food, it varies a lot from country to country. I'm the typical Colombian food I'm not a fan of. Um, I that was probably the biggest problem I had with Colombia when I lived here continuously for a number of years. The food back then was just not good, and it really has gotten much better, especially in Bogota. But even Medellin has some really decent restaurants at this point. Um, but it's not like some of these other countries. Mexico, of course, where you spend a lot of time. Brazil, especially Sao Paulo in Brazil, I think is as good or better. It's up there with any city in the world. The
Mhm.
food offerings, especially at the high end, are just unparalleled. They're phenomenal.
There's
Um,
something I'd push back on you on, which you mentioned a lot on Twitter when we talk about food, is like the high end restaurants and stuff,
mhm.
and comparing where in Latin America are the good high end restaurants, but that's really only in the mega cities or the biggest cities. But when you start going to normal places, be it tier B cities or little pueblos and stuff like that, you don't have those high end restaurants, and you're basically fully dependent on the local food. Like in Colombia, once you leave Bogota, Medellin, you're basically fully dependent on the local food, no? And wouldn't that kind of impact things?
You are, and I think that's one of the big reasons I always gravitate towards the mega cities or the tier
Jerz
one,
needs
tier
to
two
eat.
cities, because yeah, to me, I love restaurants, and I need to surround myself by good food offerings. Luckily, I love red meat, and that's a huge. I probably eat more red meat than anything else. So the good thing is, in most parts of Latin America, they're big meat eaters. So even in those small towns, you usually can get really good steaks. So that's sort of my saving grace. That's the typico that I do when I go to the smaller towns for a short time. I don't really spend extended periods of time in outside of, I'd say, tier two cities.
Jerz is a world city or bust type of guy.
I love the energy of the big cities. Even when I lived in the US, I always gravitated towards living. I lived in, I went from San Francisco. I've lived in Los Angeles, Miami, Las Vegas. I always, New York. I always have gravitated towards the larger mega cities.
If I may ask, how old are you now?
I am 49, so I'm actually a little bit, well, actually a lot older than most of the people on Twitter.
And has your perspective changed as you've gotten older in certain ways as a traveler and as a LatAm enthusiast?
I think it has because I think as I've gotten older, I've become more insistent on a higher end lifestyle. I think when you're in your 20s, even into the well into the 30s, um, you can come down here and you can live a good but not terribly expensive life. And as you always write about, you can save money, you can start businesses, you can do that sort of thing, and it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten to want and expect more of the finer things. So I'll rent more expensive apartments. I gravitate towards the more expensive restaurants, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. Um, and I think also it comes with the traveling. I think I generally like flying back and forth to Europe. I'll go with the business class now. When I was younger, I didn't even really think about it. A middle seat, cheapest available. That's what I would gravitate towards. Now it's like, okay, I need my bed. I need to be able to sleep, but I got very into miles and points, so I don't necessarily pay for that seat. So um,
Hmm.
I think I've become a lot
Maybe,
smarter with how I travel.
I'm definitely. I know you got some good stories on miles and points and some perspectives, so we'll come back to that. But I wanted to just double down on the idea of the expectation of needing the finer things as one gets older, and how Latin America fits into that. Because obviously, as you said, Europe is a little more organized, a little more better for you know closer retirement age people. And so I'm curious how you think about Latin. Sorry, that was not supposed to be a dig. I just meant,
No, no, no worries.
but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
I know
And
what you're saying.
so I was curious how Latin America fits into that, and do you ever feel like it's like, oh, I'm tired of this shit when I don't know when you get the Latin hammer, or you know what I mean? Like it's
Well, I
interesting that someone who has location independence will continue to choose Latin America.
I think a lot of it has to do with where you choose to live and spend your time in Latin America. And of course, after doing this for a while, I've built the connections that allow me to avoid many of the problems that an inexperienced person's going to have here. When I have problems, I tend to have people I can call who can fix those problems for me really quickly. I think living one thing I think when you look at prices in Latin America, but really anywhere in the world, you get to a level. And once you get to that higher level, it gets a lot more expensive anywhere you are. So even in a place like Colombia, yeah, it's cheap, but you can very easily find apartments, especially in Bogota, in the northern part of Bogota, um, that are five, even $10,000 a month, and those
Hmm.
apartments are not primarily occupied by foreigners either.
Hmm.
So to live at that high end is expensive. It's a lot more expensive than people think, especially in the mega cities. So
Hmm.
I know I posted something about this a while ago, like Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is a very expensive city, and I think to live a good life in Sao Paulo, you need to come down with a realistic expectation, because a lot of people, they come down and they want a good life. The phrase that gets thrown a lot, I want to live like a king. And the reality is, for a few $1,000s a month outside of some smaller cities, in my opinion, you're really not going to be living like a king. It takes
What's
more money.
what's your definition of living like a king?
Well, I think living in a large, say, penthouse apartment overlooking the city, probably have a full time maid, maybe a cook, maybe a driver, eating out at the top restaurants or buying the finest cuts of meat. Travel, that's a big one for me, because I still, even when I'm based somewhere, I love taking trips. I love traveling, and when you do that and you're staying in five-star hotels, it gets very expensive quickly.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad, with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. And so, with Latin America as part of your kind of global internationalization strategy, I know you like Eastern Europe, you like Western Europe, Latin America. Like you're not as married to the region as maybe I am in some ways, but um, so how, like, if I had to double down on that answer, like what keeps you coming back to Latin America? Is it just that you feel alive, or is it because of the value, or how would you describe it?
I think it's more the excitement. I like what you just said. It makes you feel alive. So I find myself, after, I'd say, a few months maximum, like probably 4 months in Europe, I start to feel a little bit bored. It's a little bit
Same.
plain. It's a little bit, and then I come to
I get super bored in Europe.
after a few months, right?
Yeah.
And then I come to Latin America. I spend, say, 4 months in Latin America, and then after 4 months, I get frustrated. It's too much chaos. I need my order. I need my quiet, and so then I go back to Europe. And that's why I say, for me, it's like the perfect combination, just going back and forth. Because when I want the quiet, when I want the order, when I want the calm, as I describe it, I go to Europe. And then when I want my chaos, when I want my excitement, I come to Latin America.
And what would you say to someone listening to this that's like, you know what? I'll skip the chaos. I just give me like a chill, boring life.
I think there's some great spots in Europe. I think you can find it in Latin America too. If you get outside the major cities, of course, everything's going to be a lot calmer. And the same thing really goes for Europe. I go to Europe, I tend to stay in the big cities. So it's really not that calm. It's just calm for me, for my personality. I think the same thing would apply. Somebody who really wants calm all the time is probably going to do better, whether it's in Latin America or in Europe, a smaller city. Maybe somewhere in Spain or in Portugal by the beach, a small town. Um,
Hmm.
that's where
I
very
love how
relaxing.
our idea of calm is like Madrid.
Yeah, exactly. That's my idea of calm, and that's where most of the time when I go to Europe, that's where I spend my time. I have an apartment in Madrid, and I really love Madrid. It's it, I didn't, it's changed a lot over the years. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, Barcelona was the city, but those cities in a lot of ways have reversed. And other than Barcelona having a beach, which of course is very nice, I love the beach, Madrid's just a much more livable city. And I
Mhm.
just love the energy of walking down the streets, the restaurants, everybody on the street eating dinner at 11, 12 o'clock at night. I really enjoy that.
Really cool. Hmm. And do you have like a specific rhythm of the year that you follow, or you just really kind of follow um, your emotions, for lack of a better word, or do you follow like the weather or conferences or something to do with work?
I think I just sort of followed the emotions more than anything else. Of course, the seasons come into play much more in Europe. Um, I enjoy the summers there. Not so
Mhm.
much in Madrid because it gets really hot, but the last half dozen years or so, I've gone to Greece for at least a month during the summer. Um, I summers in Europe have something special about them. Just I can't really put my finger on it, but for those who haven't experienced it, you've got to spend time in Europe in the summer, I think. Everybody's out, the weather's nice, the girls all run around wearing as few clothes as possible. It's just a nice it's a nice environment.
Definitely. All right. Let's get into. I really want to hear your take on a lot of stuff about issues of having a non-U.S. spouse, from like a visa perspective, a tax perspective. I guess at a high level, what are people's options? Like, let's just say you have a spouse from Colombia and you're American, and you just want to get your girlfriend some sort of way to come to the United States, to meet your parents, to meet your grandma that's never going to fly to Colombia, right? Like what is the portfolio of opportunities that are available?
So the big problem right now during the pandemic, Trump fired all of the consulate staff around the world. So basically, we're in a situation where you can't get appointments for tourist visas. And I know there's been some debate that some of the consulates have appointments that are sooner. And I've actually tried to make some of those appointments. So even when it appears on the list that the wait time is 21, 28 days, when you actually go in, fill out the application, and try to make the appointment, it's not available. The appointment's 1, 2 years out, same as everywhere else.
Hmm.
So right now, the biggest challenge is there's just simply no appointments. So if you start dating a Colombian, if you start dating somebody from Brazil and they don't already have a tourist visa, they're not gonna get one anytime soon. And it's very unfortunate situation because you have everybody seemingly coming to the US illegally, and yet there's no way for people who want to do it the right way, who want to do it legally, to come.
Hmm.
Um, so there are a few strategies that I found. They're of course not instant, but they've worked for myself. They've worked for some clients of mine. The one I use and recommend the most is a program through Spain. Basically, if you are a natural born citizen, there is some debate about what that actually means. But if your girlfriend is from a Latin American country and gets residence in Spain, after 2 years, she's eligible to apply for citizenship and get a Spanish passport. And the beauty of that is with the Spanish passport, of course, she can use the ESTA, which means she doesn't have to formally apply to the visa. She just needs to go online and pay the 10 or 15 bucks and get approved before actually traveling to the US. So that's the back doorway that I usually recommend. There are a couple of different visas that can get the girlfriend from Latin America um, the residence permission in Spain for that 2 year period. The newest one, there's a digital nomad visa. In most cases, that's not advisable just because the rules and regulations are very complicated, and that's actually a much more difficult visa to get. The easiest one is something they call the non-lucrative visa, which basically means you're not going there to work. You're actually technically not working at all. You just show you have 30,000 euros in the bank or thereabouts, and they give you visa for 1 year. And then at the end of the first year, you can renew it. They'll give you 2 years. But then, of course, at the end of that second year, you can apply for the citizenship, which right now is taking about 6 to 12 months, depending. So, in a time frame of about 3 years, which of course is a long time frame, it's not an immediate solution. But for somebody who's in a relationship, who's serious, who maybe doesn't want to do the fiance or the spouse route to get them an actual U.S. visa, the alternative that I found that works best is the Spanish non-lucrative visa to citizenship path, 2 to 3 years.
Okay. We can double down on this one, but before we do, I wanted to understand, is basically the only opportunities either the 10-year tourist visa, which is impossible to get an appointment for, or or a first world citizenship, basically a European citizenship that gives you visa free access. Obviously, you could maybe buy Malta for your girlfriend if you were balling, right?
You got,
Are
you got,
those
yeah.
are those like are those like legit the only two ways to do it? Either first
So
world
the other,
passport or
or if you did not want to get them an actual residence visa, which would be something like a fiance visa or a spouse visa. Now, the other problem with that, and this has come up a lot with people I've worked with, you cannot, if you are a non-US resident, so if you're somebody like myself, you don't live in the US,
right.
you're using the foreign earned income exclusion, that sort of thing,
You
you
can't
actually,
sponsor.
you cannot sponsor them without having the intent to actually go back and bring them and live in the US, which is again just a real odd sort of quirk in the law, that somebody like myself, I'm required to pay tax, yet I'm not allowed to bring a girlfriend, a spouse, a partner back to the US if I'm not going to go back there to live.
Insane.
It really is. I think it's a really it's a bad law, just
And are
for
there
lack of
other
better.
things are there other things they could do, like maybe like the I'm just trying to think out of the box here, but like the EB-5 investment visa or something?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things like that, but then you're also looking at, again, getting into that U.S. tax net. So I don't know if I would necessarily recommend that, depending what the situation is. Um, I think, one of the nice things, if you do have a foreign girlfriend or a foreign spouse you trust, there are a lot of potential tax benefits. And so a lot of people, in my opinion, are way too eager to get them that green card, to get them the US passport, without thinking about the long-term tax strategy and what's really in the best interest of your family unit.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you if somebody becomes a U.S. green card holder or a U.S. citizen, they are, as long as they maintain that green card or U.S. citizenship, they have lifetime tax reporting requirements, the same as I do.
Hmm.
And that's a big burden because For example, if you have a foreign spouse and that foreign spouse were to say have a business in a country, let's say Panama or Paraguay, um, they are in no way subject to US tax. But as soon as you get them that green card, as soon as you get them that US citizenship, they are subject to US tax. So it's a real game changer. And it's something that I think not enough people think about before getting those documents for their significant other.
Yeah, I don't know this area super well, so maybe you can educate me. It's like if you have a foreign spouse that you claim on your tax return, there's a bunch of benefits for that. And so I've heard, I was on some random webinar earlier this week, and they were saying in most cases it's better to just keep your foreign spouse a foreign spouse and not to repatriate her to the U.S. for tax purposes, something like that.
Absolutely correct. And the big reason why is that foreign spouse can earn income and can have a business, and that income is in no way subject to US tax. And of course, because you're married to her, you as the US citizen can potentially benefit from that income from that business. And legally, you don't have those tax obligations that you would otherwise have.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah, so let's say, well, okay, for example, I have a Venezuelan girlfriend. Um, we let's say we move to Paraguay, or we establish a tax residence in Paraguay, and she has a online business that is making $10,000 to $15,000 US a month. Okay, well, because that, as we know, Paraguay is a territorial tax country, she doesn't have to pay tax on that income in Paraguay. Her citizenship is Venezuelan, which does not tax worldwide income like the U.S. She doesn't live in Venezuela, so she also doesn't have tax requirements, tax obligations in Venezuela. And because she's not a spouse, because she's not a U.S. green card holder, she has no reporting requirements to the U.S. either. So that 10, 15,000 stays tax free, as opposed to if you got her the green card, if you got her the US citizenship, that basically is US income at that point. Yes, she could claim the foreign earned income exclusion and deductions and such like that, but it becomes a US tax obligation,
Mm.
the earnings from that business.
So it's basically better to be 100% tax free than than to join the U.S. and have to
It,
deal with deductions.
in my opinion, and just not just dealing with it, we're not just talking about the dealing with it, we're talking about the actual money you would have to pay. Yeah, you
Right.
even with the deductions, you're going to have an obligation in the thousands, if not
Right.
tens of thousands of dollars
So
per year.
so
So
what
it's
do you do when you file? Like, are you filing as married or do you file as single and like there's just no mention of the foreign spouse?
well, technically speaking, you are required to file as married, filing, but filing singles, filing solo. That's the obligation that the U.S. taxpayer has. Now, that doesn't mean that every U.S. taxpayer necessarily does that, but following the letter of the law, that is how you would have to file.
I don't even get what you said. It sounded like you said both things. You file single but married?
Yes, in other words, you basically married filing separately, I think it's called.
Okay,
You
okay, yeah,
have to you technically have to declare to the IRS you are married. Now,
gotcha.
some people choose not to do that, but again, this is not tax advice, and no one's saying that that's what you should do, but some people do that.
And if you did the married filing separate, would you still get all these benefits of like a tax-free foreign spouse, or like what's kind of
You
the
would
trade-off?
You still do get those benefits, but the caveat is it's more likely you're going to have eyes on you, and the IRS could possibly start looking at what your wife does, even though she's not a U.S. resident, not a U.S. Citizen, and they're really looking: does the U.S. tax person, the U.S. citizen, have interest in this business? And that has been sort of how people have
Uh,
gotten caught up in having problems with the IRS with this sort of arrangement, because technically, say you are actually the American citizen running the business, it's simply in your spouse's name. That, of course,
right,
is tax fraud. You can't do that.
right.
So it's a very gray area, but done properly with the right tax professionals and lawyers, you can create a legal setup where everything's kept separate and you're meeting the IRS obligations so that that income does not have to be reported.
Right. And maybe the spouse could, have good like bookkeeping or meeting notes type of thing so that it's like clear that you're not involved in the operation of the business.
Exactly. It's creating that paper trail and that evidence that in fact it is not your business.
Cool, cool. Foreign spouse, tax free. Sounds good. Obviously, the issue is if your wife's just not like an entrepreneur, and she would actually get more benefit out of, the U.S. labor market. But I guess that's all obvious that in that
And
case,
that's why on a case by case basis you have to look at it. And I think that is sort of the pull for a lot of the people and a lot of the women from Latin America. That's the dream. They still believe the American dream, which is they want access to that job market. They want to go to the US and make money because I you and I might say a lot of negative things about the US, and there are a lot of negative things to say, but it still is categorically the best job market in the world. If you want to go work a W-2 9 to 5 type job, there's nowhere in the world that's better.
Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of Bitrefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about Bitrefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amounts so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up, and you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. For sure, for sure. Do you ever try to convince Latinos, like, man, all you need is a laptop and a bank account, and you can make as much money as me? You do not need to go to the US.
I have, and I've successfully worked with some. In fact, with Twitter, more and more, I am starting to work with some clients from Colombia, some clients from Brazil, and a lot of them, like you said, it almost doesn't even occur to them that yes, there's this great job market in the U.S., but doing something for yourself and setting something up yourself can actually be better and in the end more profitable and give you more freedom and all of that stuff that we love.
Mm-hmm. Let's come back to the visas for this foreign spouse a bit, because that's one of the things you're best known about on Twitter. And I just want to make sure we exhausted all the avenues here. So, getting a visa to the States, the only, I guess, tax-free visa would be the tourist visa, right? All the other visa types would probably involve becoming like a US person for tax purposes.
Exactly. And in most cases, I don't think the other sort of specialized worker, specialized business visas normally aren't going to apply to Latina spouses and girlfriends anyways. You're basically, again, between a tourist visa, a fiance slash spouse
Right.
visa.
So
Um,
you wouldn't be like, baby, just buy a factory in Ohio and employ 20
yeah,
people.
Exactly. In most cases, that's just it's just
No,
not it's not a realistic option. It doesn't
right.
make sense.
No, but the it sounds like the idea is like you don't even want them to repatriate, what I don't even know what the term is, into the States. Just keep it foreign, get them either the tourist visa or some kind of second passport. And then so I guess let's start strategizing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and the other thing that I really want to mention that I tell a lot of people, in most cases, people who come down to Latin America, start dating a girl, and bring her back to the States, it usually doesn't work out. So tax
Ooh, this is a
issues
juicy
aside,
one. This is a juicy
it's
one.
it's usually not the best thing to do.
I wasn't
I
even gonna go there, but all right, let's do it. Hit me with it. Hit me with it.
so
So it's either you
so
stay or they come.
those are the choices, and I think usually the cultural differences are hard enough anyways. But I think when you take Latinas out of their environment and you bring them back to the US, in most cases, most of the people I've worked with, friends I've had who've tried to do that, in almost every case, it has not worked out. I see a
Why is
lot
that?
of I think it's for a few reasons. I think a lot of Latinos go and Latinos as well go there and they don't like the culture. They think they'll like it because they can make a lot of money, but the culture is just so different. And they get there and they don't like it. So they're not happy. Um, and then I think the other thing that happens a lot in the case of couples, a lot of the women end up getting Americanized, so to speak. So they have one set of values that they've learned in Latin America, and then they sort of get exposed to the Western American values, which aren't the same thing anymore. And it causes a lot of problems. And I know a couple of friends of mine who did it. And in a relatively short amount of time, within a few years, they basically said to me that the woman they loved and brought back after a couple of years was not the same person. They were basically like all of the women they had dated before in the United States who they didn't like, and that was why they went to where they went to Latin America in the first place. So I think that that should also be a big consideration in addition to the tax stuff. Is, do you really want to bring this girlfriend spouse to live in the United States? And I
So
would
and
recommend.
these are, I totally agree with you, and I think about this a lot. But just to summarize, so issue number one is she thinks she's going to like it based on movies and stuff, but after a while, she's not even going to like it. And then the second issue is it's going to change who she is as a person, and she's going to stop making the bed and stuff like that. Those are kind of the two issues. Because here's the thing: is if you tried to explain this to the spouse, they they'd be like it wouldn't be enough it wouldn't be enough of a reason. It would be like, really, we're not moving to the first world because it's going to change my personality. Really, we're not moving because I'm going to think it's boring. Like, it's kind of, you know what I mean? It's like, I totally
Exactly.
know what you're saying, but it's like there's not even like a lot of like oomph there, you know?
Well, I think the third reason I'll give, and this reason might work better as an explanation, is the distance from the family, because in Latin
Mm.
America culture, the family is so important. And that's the other thing that I see. They're so used to being around the parents, the grandparents, the cousins, the brothers, the sisters, and then all of a sudden you take them away from that. And they're so used to that every day or every week of their life being with all of those people, and then suddenly they're not. And that is, I think, the third thing that makes it
Yeah.
very
Yeah, that's
difficult for
huge.
most of them.
And then what do you think happens? Like you've anecdotally seen this over your 15 years in Latin America. Um, does the spouse often stay in the US for the job? Like they get divorced or whatever. Does the spouse stay in the US for the job market or do they go home to the family?
It depends. The ones who come and the issue is just the general unhappiness or being away from the family, they usually go back. The others uh, who have changed, they tend to stay, and they end up with another gringo usually.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe somebody with more money.
They
I've
trade
seen that.
up.
I've seen that happen a couple of times.
I believe it. And so your advice would be, if you want to get entangled with someone in Latin America, you got to be prepared to stay there.
Yeah, I think the best advice is to either plan to stay in Latin America. I also think if you want to move to a more Western place, you're better off bringing them to Europe than to the United States.
Hmm.
I've
Yeah,
seen
what do
more
you think about
success with
doing
that.
like the third, like neutral territory, like not her spot, not your spot, something neutral like a Europe or I don't know, Panama City or some
It,
random
it,
beach town.
it can work with the right person. That comes down to how how good of job you've done picking the right person. Um, if it's not the right person, it won't work. But if you find somebody that has that same love of adventure and living in different places, see, the thing is, a lot of people never have that conversation. And I think when I first moved to Latin America and started dating, that was the mistake I made. I waited way too long before I had that conversation and really made sure that the person liked that kind of lifestyle.
What conversation?
A conversation where you find out, hey, would you be open to living in a different place? Hey, do you like to spend months in other countries and other parts of the world? Because if you have that honest conversation, you'll find a lot of Latinas, when you really get to know them, they don't want that. They don't like that.
Hmm.
So again, that's really getting to know the person and making sure if that's who you are and that's what you want, you're compatible in that aspect.
I'll hit you with one more kind of controversial one. But I was speaking to a European buddy, and he had a Latino girlfriend, and he said, and they broke up. And I said, man, like, why'd you break up? They were actually traveling the world. They went to different places, blah blah blah. I said, like, man, why'd you guys break up? And he's like, you know what I learned is that Latinas just aren't that adaptable in outside of their own culture. Like you bring like an Asian girl anywhere in the world, she'll probably be pretty adaptable. White girl, pretty adaptable. But like Latinas, like they're really only successful in Latin American culture, and maybe they'll do all right, somewhere else in Latin America, Mexico, Colombia, that kind of thing. But they're not as adaptable when you take them out of that.
And I 100% agree, and that's why it's so important to have that type of conversation and really get to know the person and make sure that they are one of the few Latinas who is actually adaptable, because there are some. You just have to find them. I know, like from my experiences, a perfect example to this is like with dress. So the way what's considered appropriate, say in Medellin or in some of these places, when you get outside of Latin America, it's just simply not appropriate, right? In certain
Did
situations.
you say dressed, like the way you're dressed?
Yes, the
Okay.
clothing. And
Okay.
like I had one girlfriend, and I remember we were traveling in Europe, and I wanted to take her to buy new clothes. I wasn't going to say, hey, the clothes you are wearing are not appropriate. I was more subtle about it, but she got very upset. Don't tell me how to dress. Don't, because they think what applies in one situation applies to every situation, and that can be very problematic with certain Latino women who are not adaptable.
Hmm. Interesting. It's tough. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I think it is an interesting topic, and I know you have sort of like an interesting perspective on this. Um, so do you? Yeah. Well, we can go back to the visa thing because I do want to actually exhaust that one. I know it doesn't leave us much time to talk about citizenship by descent and stuff, but the spouse thing's huge, and it's good to have an expert on this stuff. So there's the Spanish 2-year visa, which sounds pretty much like the best one out there. Are there any other options? Like if maybe you just don't want to go to Spain, like what other potential options are there in Europe, for example?
I know Portugal has some programs, especially for Brazilian girlfriends.
Right.
Portugal has some good options through the community of Portuguese speaking countries that makes the visa and then the path to citizenship relatively fast and easy. Um, the Spain one though is just so clean because you're literally only showing, and there are a few other small requirements, but the big requirement is you're showing 30,000 euros in the bank, which really is not that difficult to do. And the thing is, because it's a non-lucrative visa, you're technically not working anyways. So under that visa, you're not going to become part of the Spanish tax system anyways. So
Hmm.
it's a visa option. You're not going to become a Spanish tax resident, um, and it technically requires 6 months per year in Spain. There's even some flexibility with that. Um, Entering and exiting through other Schengen countries, if you can get close to that 6 months, in most cases, you're going to be okay. So
Hmm.
I just, of all the research I've done, it's just the easiest path, and it's clean. And the other thing with Spain and Portugal are really the only European countries that have that expedited path for the citizens of Latin American countries.
So in your experience, Spain and Portugal are basically the only options?
They're the best options. The other option you mentioned, citizenship by descent, that's the other thing that I
Right.
always
So obviously, if that's not exhausted, like, have you looked at maybe like a Latvia or I don't know, like something else that might be out there, just in case Spain doesn't work for whatever reason?
but you're not going to get a citizenship in 2 to 3 years. That's the problem.
Right. I guess it'll be like 5, but
Exactly. You're in that 5 to 10 year range usually, depending on the country. So, and it's much more complicated. So the reason I say just exhaust the Spain and Portugal is just because it's easy. It's they have the specific programs for the people born in Latin American countries.
so why isn't everyone doing this? Like what like if all you have to have is 30K in the bank, show up in Spain, anyone from Latin America, why is every Latino not doing this?
So more and more, I am seeing them do it. I started doing some posts on Twitter in Spanish, and just specifically about this program, and they had crazy responses. And I think the when I ask them, why haven't you? They just simply don't know. That's the biggest reason. It hasn't occurred to them. I think especially the upper socioeconomic persons from Latin America, a lot of them have considered the citizenship by descent. And
Hmm.
so, like in Colombia, the people from the upper strata is a huge percentage of them do have the dual citizenship already because they trace the ancestors. Same thing in Brazil. It's just a huge percentage of the population in Latin America is entitled to some sort of European passport, albeit Spain, Portugal, or Italian. Those are the three big ones.
Hmm.
And I think that's the other path that really should be investigated. Do you have the um, is there a path,
Yeah. So
pardon
how
my
far back
ancestors?
does it go for the Spain? Because I've heard differing sources about whether it can go to great grandparents or if it's only grandparents, that kind of thing.
In general in Spain it's only to grandparents.
Okay.
The little like loophole is that you can, like, if your parent is still alive, they can get it and then you can potentially get it from them, which would allow you to go back to the great grandparent.
Okay. So if the grandparent, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Because I've heard that too about like, oh, the grandparent has to be alive. Like if the grandparent is from Spain but passed away, you still can't do it.
Yeah, there Spain has some quirks to their citizenship law, um, but in most cases, you are safe to the grandparent with all of those countries. Um, in Portugal, it's easier to go back to the great grandparent than it is in
Oh,
Spain.
really?
In Italy, you can potentially go back unlimited generations.
Right, right.
So,
So
so it's,
Spain, even if the grandparent is has passed away, it's still doable.
if the grandparent has if it's yes, if you can get it through your grandparent, even if the grandparent has passed away. Correct.
Okay, okay. So let's walk through this non-lucrative thing in a little bit more detail. If you're tight on time, let me know. But
No, that's good for now.
how does someone get started on this? And because I'm pretty down. I think half the people listening to this are pretty down because it sounds like literally the only way. Like, and you know what I mean. So how do we get
It's
started here?
certainly a good path. So basically, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter, the Jerz Way. Um, I will ask you for some basic documents, run through the process with you. Um, the actual approval process for the visa, depending on where you're located, usually takes about a month. Sometimes it could be a little bit less, a little bit more, but a good rule of thumb is about a month. Then from the time the visa is approved, you have 60 days to enter Spain and apply for your NEET, which is a Spanish foreign ID. You will make the appointment for you. You just show up at the police station with the visa and a few other documents, and you get that card. You go then pick that card up in another month, and then at the end of the first year, you're going to have to apply again. But for the second application, everything's done electronically, and you get the approval. The only thing you'll have to do is go to the police station again, get another foreigner ID, and then at the year two mark, we begin the process of applying for the citizenship.
Hey everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. Okay, so people are applying at their local embassy. So you're applying at like the Spanish embassy in Bogota, Spanish embassy in Mexico City. Is that the idea?
The consulate, yes. The first visa, what the clients I work with, we put everything together for you, give you the packet, and there's not an interview or anything per se. The people who actually work in the consulate are just their clerks. They don't ask you questions. They just make sure that the packet's complete. So you actually have to personally deliver the packet to your consulate, either where you have citizenship or where you have legal residence. You can do it at
Right.
either of those.
You have to
Yeah,
personally deliver the pack. You're saying how long does it take to get the appointment?
it depends on the consulate, but it's fast. Usually I can get an appointment within 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow. And
It's
what kind
not like
of
the U.S. But because like with the U.S., there's a whole interview process, and the Spanish consulates are set up with they're literally like clerks. They're not even like officials, and all they do is they take the packet, sort of thumb through it, and say, "Okay, thank you," and that's it. It's a ridiculously simple process.
Okay, and then you have how long to enter Spain after you get approved?
You have 60 days.
60 days to enter Spain with
60 days after
like your
approval, and
approved. It's only one application. Like you just get the appointment, boom, and they stamp you right there on the spot.
no. So after you leave the application, the actual approval will come maybe 2 to 3 weeks later.
Okay. Dude, you're telling me it only takes like 6 weeks to get approved for the visa in total? Three to
Six,
get the appointment, three to get
you'll have
approved?
you will I would say 6 to 8 weeks. You will have the appointment. You will have the approval. You will have everything. And
That's
then
insane.
after that 2 months, 60 days, don't forget that, because I've
Uh-huh.
had some people who don't pay attention to that. And then if you don't do that within 60 days, you literally have to start the process over again.
And what type of appointment is the appointment that you're getting specific to this visa, or how do you know which type of a visa they or what type of appointment to get?
No, they just have it's a general visa appointment.
General visa appointment. Okay,
Yeah.
and how long does the money need to be in the account before applying? Because for example, Mexico, you got to have the money in the bank like 6 months.
It's ideally it's been seasoned for, so been in the bank account for 6 months, but in most cases they'll accept 3 months, because
Mm.
they're not looking for the money coming in and out. They're just looking for the money sitting in the account. And the other cool thing, it doesn't have to be in a Spanish bank. It doesn't have to be in euros. It can be in any bank. It just needs to be the equivalent of approximately 30,000 euros.
Right. So usually, I forget the names of the banks, and let's just say Santander, right? So it's just the local Colombian branch of Santander. You got the equivalent of 30. Maybe you probably want to do like 40K to be on
No,
the safe side.
no, I'm saying it doesn't even have to be in Santander. It can be in Bank Colombia. It can be in
Right, right. Yeah,
Citibank.
I just don't even know. I just don't even know all the bank names in Colombia.
Yeah, it can be. It doesn't have to be any affiliation with Spain at all. It can just
No, yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
your local U.S. bank
And in
denominated in
Colombian
dollars.
pesos, in Mexican
In
pesos.
Colombian pesos, in Mexico, Mexican pesos. The only thing to keep in mind, it has to be in the name of the person who's applying. So if you're doing this
Mhm.
for your Colombian girlfriend, it has to be in her name. It can't be in
Make
your
sure
name.
she doesn't run off.
Yeah, that's something. Well, if you don't trust her enough to keep the money in the bank, you probably shouldn't be doing it with her anyways.
No, totally. It's just funny. Um, and what about like currency fluctuations? Like, would you recommend to do like 35 or 40K just because you don't know on what day they're measuring the balance type of thing?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit less than 30,000 euros. So I always say, yeah, but you might want to. I mean, most of the unless you're talking Argentinian pesos or something, the currencies don't fluctuate that much. But
I
yeah,
mean, they
maybe
do though. They'll change like 15%
in
against
a
the
day,
euro.
in a few days.
And no, I mean like over a 6 month period. I don't know when they measure it.
Yeah. So yeah, you might want to buffer at 10, yeah, if you can put in 35,000. But in most cases, what I advise is 30, and I've never had an issue with that.
Okay, cool. Do you need a police check? What are some of the other little requirements that might screw people up?
You do need a police check. Um, the cool thing, like in Colombia, the police checks are instant. They're not such a pain like they are in the U.S.
Hmm.
You can just go online and apply, have it apostilled, and you have it in a couple of
Postal.
days.
Original birth certificate.
Yeah, you need all the original documents. The other like little quirks, you're going to need to purchase a Spanish health insurance.
Hmm.
Um, but again, it's very inexpensive. You can get a policy that qualifies for as little as 35, 40 euros a month.
Okay.
Um,
And you do that before the visa appointment
yes, you need the insurance. You need a rental contract, and
in Spain.
you need a long term rental contract in Spain.
Oh shit.
So
Okay.
that's yeah, that's one of the documents we can help you get.
Got it. Got it. Okay. What else?
Um, that's pretty much it. It's basic. The big thing is that 30,000.
Do, do you need like a utility bill or anything else in addition to that rental contract or just a contract?
No, just the contract in Spain because they assume you aren't living there yet. The utility bill. The only way that would come up is if you need to show you're applying at a weird consulate and you need to show you have the right to apply in at that consulate. That can be a good thing to include in the packet so they don't say, oh, you need to go to another consulate.
It's crazy that the wait time is only a couple weeks in Colombia, which is obviously one of the more populous countries. Um, you know what I mean? Like you would think the wait time would be longer in larger countries.
I think there just isn't the demand for the EU visas like there are for the US visas. And then also keep in mind Colombians and I think pretty much all of Latin America, they don't need visas for tourism to visit
Hmm.
Europe anymore. So because of that, there's just not much demand for people actually applying for visas. It's the tourist visas that usually cause these backlogs.
And it does it max out at 2 years, or can you keep renewing it? Do you have to switch to another visa type after the 2 years?
No, you could in theory stay on this visa forever. You get if you didn't want to get citizenship, you just wanted to stay on the residency path. You get 1 year the first time, then at renewal they give you 2 years, and then after so it would be at year three if you applied again they would give you another 2 years, which brings you to year five, and at 5 years you're entitled to permanent residence in Spain. So if you just wanted to do it as a residence and never acquire the citizenship, it's permanent residence after 5 years.
I love how citizenship is 2 years and PR is 5 years.
Isn't that funny? So a few of these countries, like Argentina, has that same quirk, right? It's you can get permanent residence after 3 years, but you can get citizenship after 2 years. Weird quirks in these laws sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I was just wondering because sometimes, let's just say you're waiting for the passport to get issued and all that stuff. You still need to have a legal visa. But I guess if you have 3 years, that's a pretty good
You
buffer. And then after the
exactly that. I
renewal.
think that's why they do it. They give you the 3 years, so you have the visa for that third year while you're waiting for the citizenship to finalize.
Any downsides? Because this just sounds like an absolute no brainer.
Downsides. Well, the only real downside I can think of is spending more than 183 days per year in Spain will make you technically a tax resident, which Spain's as
Right.
ugly, if
No,
not
actually, here
worse.
was my question. You reminded me. Thank you. Is is so your girl? And obviously it could reverse roles, but whatever. So your girl gets this non-lucrative visa with the 30K. Are you applying independently? also for a non-lucrative visa, and so you're both going to get them separately? Or are you applying as a couple, or only she gets it and then maybe you do like a tourist visa thing, or maybe you already have EU citizenship like yourself, you have Austria obviously. But like what about the American dude in this relationship?
So it depends on your situation and what you want.
Let's
It
assume you
is
want to stay in Europe all year round with your girl.
So one thing you could do then, you could apply for the non-lucrative with like a companion. Okay. So in this case, you would need to either be married or have the relationship registered, like a Perea de
Hmm.
Hecho type deal.
Right.
The Union Libre, I think they call it in Colombia.
Right. And if you
Um,
weren't willing to do that,
you
you'd
you could
probably
do it
have to apply in the States,
unless you had
or I
residence.
get, unless
Not
you
if you
had
had
residence.
and you had residence in Colombia, you could apply at the same time. So you could either literally do it completely separately, two applications, 30,000 euros, 30,000 euros. But if you do it as a couple, the amount gets reduced somewhat. So depending on the finances, some people do like to do it in one application because you only need about 8,000 euros for the second application. So let's call it 40,000 total
Uh-huh.
as opposed to 60,000.
And then does
So
that money have to stay in the bank, or does it have to get sent to Spain, or does it literally
no,
stay in Colombia the whole time?
it just they just verify you have it, and that's that. After you have the visa,
Wow.
you can do whatever you want with it.
Crazy. Because like Costa Rica, they want you to send it, blah, blah, blah.
So the other, yeah, Spain makes it easier with this program. There's no actual investment in the country or transfer to a Spanish bank, anything like that. The other thing that I'll mention, since we're talking about the couple route, so as the U.S. person in this, you're not going to have the right to the citizenship after 2 years.
Right,
Your
right.
path typically would take 10 years. But the little loophole in this, if you're married or you have that registered partnership type thing, after the girlfriend or spouse has had citizenship for 1 year, you can apply for citizenship as her spouse or registered significant
Mhm.
other. So
And you
that
have to live
means
in Spain during that time. It's 1 year of living in Spain as a married couple, right?
exactly, but by living in Spain for 1 year, that really only means 6 months.
Right. And that could be on the non-lucrative?
That could be on the non-lucrative. It could be on a spouse visa. It could be on. You just have to have legal permission to be in Spain for that year. So if you take and you add up all the times, that means 2 years residence, then 1 year to process the citizenship, say, and then you're so in maybe 4 years, 4+ years, you as the boyfriend from the U.S. could also have Spanish citizenship.
Very cool. And I'm just thinking out loud, but if you really didn't want to get married for whatever reason, maybe the guy could do like the NHR in Portugal and live tax free in Portugal and get Portuguese citizenship after 5 years
For sure.
himself.
For sure. And the cool thing with the EU residence permissions and such, once you have that permission to live in a specific EU country, you can really live and do whatever you want within the EU.
Hmm. Yeah, like there's even like the US Dutch one where like if you're American, you start a business in
Yeah,
Amsterdam or
I
you
have a
heard of that?
friend who's doing that one. Um, that's a quirky one though. It's very easy to get the residence, but the problem with the Dutch one, and they're real sticklers about it. You're gonna have to give up the U.S.
Right.
citizenship. So
Oh
that's the
shit.
problem. That's the problem with
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I would
plan.
do Portugal. I would do the Portugal if
I
someone.
think Portugal and Spain are the two best. That's
Yeah.
what I would recommend.
Damn, this is huge, bro. I'm gonna be like looking this up right after this call.
Absolutely. Any
Okay,
questions?
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we had a couple more things on the docket, but you've been a good lad here. Um, so I'm sure a lot of people also have you know dynamite sticks going off in their head and probably want to get in contact with you. Can we hook them up like a little 10% off with code MyLatinLife, something like that?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Let's do
Well,
it.
take this time. Yeah, take this time. Tell the audience how they can get in touch with you. Anywhere you want to direct the audience's attention.
So the easiest way to get a hold of me, I'm the Jerz Way, the Jerz Way, at Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me, send a DM. I respond to all of them. Also, website thejersway.com. Sign up for my email. I send out weekly. I'm actually starting to do it more. Give tips and strategies for all this sovereignty stuff that I don't usually write about on Twitter. So, highly recommend you do that as well. Yeah, I'm happy to help anybody with residences, citizenships, business setups, tax strategies, advice on moving to Latin America. Any questions you have, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Awesome, man. We'll have to have you back because I know you and we got like 10 hours of material easily that we could cover.
For sure. For sure.
This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Again, my guest today, Jerz, aka the Jerz Way. The Way is Jerz. I always forget. The Way of Jerz. Way of Jerz. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks, guys, for listening.